Welcome to Fly on the Wall, a podcast where you have the opportunity to listen in on a live coaching conversation. Please make sure to like and subscribe. And now for today's episode.
Well, let's jump into it, man. How can I serve you today? What questions do you want to jump into?
I was just looking at just kind of where we are, and I was going to pull up some of the questions. And I don't know what wewe're going to have time to go for. One of the things that I was thinking about, Chris, was that, obviously the last 2 years, we're just like everybody else, just like businesses, nonprofits are trying to figure out how in the world do we do this in the middle of COVID and pandemic. And so I feel like that we've had to pivot a ton of times, make adjustments, switch things. I'm grateful for what I've learned the last couple of years. I have a newfound focus on discipleship and one-to-one discipleship, and I'm seeing some excellent fruit. And I think it was a Craig Groeschel leadership talk one time where he says that sometimes scarcity or a crisis breeds innovation, and so I'm grateful for that. But it seems like, obviously, we're about 50% of where we were. We were a church that was averaging a little over 200 before COVID shut service down. I think I was looking at records yesterday, and we were about 205 or something like that. And now we're about 100, to 110. So we're right there about the 50%. But I've just noticed like families with kids has been kind of our lowest demographic of coming back for some reason. And we've just been having far fewer guests. I feel like we have more to offer now. And just to kind of update you, we have brought back Connect Corner, and that's been going really well. We brought back Next Steps, and we condensed it down to a 2-week. Can you remember how you told me in the past, because we had it for 4 weeks, you said that's a very long on-ramp to get people plugged in and involved. And so we condensed everything down to 2 weeks, and it's been very effective for us. And we feel like we're kind of closing the back door, but I feel like that we're not opening the front door enough.
Right.
And so my question for you is it a marketing thing or is it a culture thing with our church that our people are not inviting enough friends, or is it both?
Well, let's speak into that for a few minutes. I do believe in marketing. I think marketing could be a great thing, but if I had to choose between marketing and culture, I would always choose culture. It is clearly a culture thing. If you have, so you're averaging about 100, 110 people, give me a rough idea. You don't need to look it up. Just a rough idea of how many first-time guests you're averaging per week. Say in the last 2 months, just per week, it would probably be an average of.
It'd probably be an average of 2 to 4. I mean, not maybe 5.
Okay. Well, if it's 5 adults, that's not too bad. Here's the thing. Here's the ratio we're looking for, Richard. We're looking for 5 adults for every 5 or more adults for every 100 adults that come to your church. 5 or more, you have an opportunity to grow. 5 or less, you're going to be fighting attrition, people that leave. So you always have people that leave. So, people leave, they retire, they die, whatever they do. But you got to have a certain amount of people just to kind of make up for the people that leave over a period of 12 months. But when you get 5 and above, for every 100, if you go 5 and above, then you have a chance for growth. If you go 5 and below, you start fighting attrition. So I do think it is a culture issue. Now, there are a couple things that you and I have talked about in the past. One is creating that invite culture. Clearly, the culture is not there. And you've heard me say this before. Anybody that reads any of my books or whatever, I always say culture is created by the same 3 things: the stories we tell, the heroes we make, the things we celebrate. It's always the same 3. It hasn't changed in 20 years or 50 years. It won't change in the next 50. That's the way culture is created. It's the stories we tell, the heroes we make, the things we celebrate. So I would say, I would look at, man, are we someone's doing some inviting. So I would find people that are either inviting or got invited. Maybe they got invited a year and a half ago and they've been coming to the church and their life got turned around. What I would do is I would tell their story, like, my life got turned around and this is what God did, and like a little testimony. But at the end, you turn the corner and say, oh yeah, but how did you come to the church? Well, a year and a half ago, I was standing in the grocery line and I got invited. Like somehow or it's someone that's doing a lot of inviting, but whether it's a person that's doing inviting or a person a year ago that got invited, we're ending at the same idea of how did you get here? And and what we're doing is we're telling the story about invite. We want to make a hero about who's ever doing the invite,
right?
Whoever did the inviting that got the person there, or whoever's doing the inviting currently, and we want to celebrate that. I know you and I have talked about that before, but I'm telling you, I'm working with a church right now. We have a thing called Virtual Executive Pastor where we work very deep with churches, and I take on a handful of them. And one of them I'm working with right now, they started, now their state came back pretty quick from the pandemic, but they started, I don't know, I'm going to say good 9 months ago, they started this invite culture thing. And they were averaging around 7 when they first started, and now they're averaging around 16. 7 guests up to 16. The only thing that's changed is they have been relentless. They didn't just do it once a month. They've been telling the story through video, through a testimony, through an interview. They've been telling the story twice a month for the last 9 months, and the numbers are just going through the roof right now of first-time guests. And the funny thing is, like, the services are the same, the whatever is the same, but our numbers are going through the roof. But I'm telling them it's because you're changing the culture. But here's the thing, though. You can't change culture overnight. It's not like, hey, I told the story last week, nothing changed. Well, it takes several months of telling a story before people start gaining into that. And here's the one phrase I'd encourage you to write down and tell your staff. Look, we've got to tell stories about the behaviors we want repeated. Tell stories about the behaviors we want repeated. But you can't just tell one. So here's where I would start if I were you. I'd start telling invite stories. And then when you guys get good at that, start adding serving stories. And so it's like, invite
next
1 week,
stories.
Serving the next week. Invite 1 week, serving. You just start telling stories. I'm telling you, the church culture is like a river. The church will go down the river of whatever you set. Culture is like a river. You and I jump in a raging river in a boat, we're going the way of the river, whether we like it or not. That's culture. And if you start creating culture, the people that come to your church for the first time, they're jumping into the river and they will go the way of the river.
That is so good, man.
Yeah.
You said we have to tell stories about the behaviors that we want repeated. Yeah. Wow.
Yep. So I would now, as you build, like, I would make storytelling a priority. And it's like, look, we're gonna, and you're gonna get 3 months ahead. So you're not gonna like, oh, we're scrambling on Saturday night for a story. No, we're ahead 2 months or 3 months. Start with invite, then add maybe serving. Now you can't have 33 things that you're promoting, because then the invite wouldn't come up for 33 more weeks. You follow what I'm saying? Like every week you're doing a new behavior. No, maybe it's 3 or 4 behaviors: serving, small groups, generosity, and invite, or serving and invite. But I would start with one and then add another one. And so it's like first and third, or first of the month is invite, third of the month is serving. And then as you get more stories, it's like we're doing 2 a month on invite, 1 on serving. And then you just start building it up. But I'm telling you, the thing is, you have to crack, Richard, the culture code. Your church has a culture. Every church has a culture. Every organization has a culture. And culture is a combination of what you allow and what you promote. Culture on the negative side is what you allow. Well, we allow people to be toxic at our church. Well, then that's why you have a toxic church. So it's what you allow, but then it's also what you promote. stories you tell, the heroes you make, things you celebrate.
Now, on telling the stories, do you think a combination of using a story in the church in a sermon as an illustration, or video, or a combination of both?
Whenever possible, what I favor is, above anything else, personally, what I favor is a live interview or a video interview. I like it. You can work it into the sermon. You can be creative with it. Like, greeting time is done. People greet each other, and then they all sit down, they look up, and it's not even you. It's like one of your host pastors or someone that's, kind of has a great stage presence. And there's 3 chairs up there. It's the host, whoever that is from your team. And then it's, Bob and Tiffany, this couple, whatever, and they're interviewing them 3 or 4 minutes. We already know 5 minutes long. We already know what they're going to say because we pre-interview them. Mm-hmm. But whenever possible, here's why I like it. Because even if they're a little bit nervous, they're a little not polished. They're a little bit nervous. They're not a professional. Maybe they get a little nervous. Maybe they even cry from their nervousness. Like, that authenticity, in my opinion, is what works. Here's the difference. Which one are you going to go to faster? Are you going to go faster because the owner of the new steakhouse down the street tells you it's good, or because your next door neighbor tells you it's good? You're going to go for your next door neighbor. The person up on stage is the next door neighbor. You're the owner of the restaurant.
Yeah, for sure.
So get them to say it whenever possible, live or video, whatever possible. And even if you have, here's another one, even if you have someone like, that, like, I don't want to be on stage and I don't want to do a live interview and blah, blah, blah. And you're like, maybe I'll work it in the sermon. Well, what if it's kind of has some emotional trigger to it? It's pretty heavy. Maybe it's just 2 or 3 paragraphs. Maybe they can sum it up in 2 or 3 paragraphs. We block their name out and we literally put the email up on the screen, and in between song 2 and 3, the worship leader reads it.
Wow.
People are crying like, oh, it's an amazing story. And then your worship leader says, I just read you this story. And you know what's really amazing about this story? This person's life, whose name is covered because she doesn't want to be known, it got turned around. But you know how it got turned around? Because she goes to a gym down the street. And for the last 4 months, someone's been inviting her. That's what we do at the church. Man, let's sing this last worship song. They go back into it. People will go nuts. You talk about making your worship session amazing. Throw in a story that's a life change story, but points back to the invite culture.
That's really good. It's so crazy. I think in the middle of all of this stuff, as soon as you started down the road of the stories we tell, the heroes make, the things we celebrate, it's like, I know that's been ingrained in me through our past conversations and you coming to our church, but it's so fascinating and sad how quickly we forget it. And I think we got to give ourselves grace, but I don't want to give myself excuse. I mean, I know the last couple of years have been crazy, but it is where we are. And I just feel like that, we can't keep looking to the past. We got to move forward. But man, this is so key because we're seeing some things, and I think we're trying to do a good job promoting them. But it might have been a conversation that I had with my wife. She was like, you know what, if all we're doing is announcing things, it just feels like a program that we're promoting. Yeah. Instead of a life change story, and it just feels like you said, hearing from the owner of the restaurant, right, instead of a neighbor telling you about it.
Difference. And remember though that, and you're right, your wife is spot on. Otherwise, it's just message, worship, and a bunch of announcements. Versus, hey, here's this story that maybe moves our heart, maybe it's a little funny, I don't know, whatever. Here's a story, but it points to a behavior that we want repeated. So people will be moved by the story, they'll be moved by the customer, but they'll also be moved by the behavior that's being endorsed. And they'll ultimately they'll repeat the behavior. Doesn't happen overnight though. That's the thing, is that if you're going to do this, you gotta be consistent with it. I wouldn't start it until you had 3 or 4 in the can. We call them in the can, meaning you've got 3 or 4 videos ready to go, or 3 or 4 interviews lined up. Once you got 3 or 4, then whatever, then you're working like it's March and you're working on June, or whatever, May, you're working on August. Like, you're a couple months ahead. It's not a problem, but make it a priority. And where do you get these stories from? You get them from one of the biggest places, you get them from your staff meetings. Like, hey guys, what have we heard in the last 2 or 3 months? What did we hear in the last 2 or 3 months? What did we hear in the last 2 or 3 days, or this last Sunday that that kind of endorses what we're all about? What have we heard in the last Sunday? Someone will say, well, last Sunday I was standing in the hallway and this person told me, that they got invited, or they had this big life change story. Okay, do we know how they came to the church? Their life's being moved by God, but do we know how they came? Oh, I think 2 years ago they got invited by. Good. Now, someone's got to capture that. You need what's called a story curator. Story curator is the person capturing the stories, but the staff is hearing stories. We're just not capturing them. But if you're going to be inconsistent with it, then I wouldn't say there's no reason to do it, but you won't get results. You'll get movement. You'll get, that was a cool service, that was a great story, but you won't get culture change unless you're consistent.
There needs to be stories or testimonies in every service, really.
As many as you can do, man. I'm telling you, there are some churches, I think of Saddleback, 10 years ago, I used to listen to them all the time. I don't listen as much anymore. I listen more of their leadership stuff, but I'd check out their services or whatever. And I always look back and I think, they just tell stories. Mariners Church, very large church. I have a friend of mine that is on the story curating team, because they're all about collecting stories. People follow stories. Look at the Amazon commercials. Amazon doesn't brag about, although they could brag about how many packages they move, how fast they've grown, or how timely they are, or how they can get stuff to you on the same day. It's usually a story. Someone that got a job there, someone that I remember they had a guy on there that was deaf. They had a story about that. A guy that had a little bit of a handicap, but he got a job, and now his kid's going to college. What in the world are they telling stories for? They're not bragging about their organization or the church. They're just telling stories of anything they could talk about, and they have a lot to brag about. They tell stories. They've got it. The stories win every time.
Yeah.
And it's because you and I could sit there and go, we're going to preach on the Great Commission. We're going to preach on the Luke 15. We're going to preach on the lost son, lost coin, lost sheep. Yep. And we should. But to some degrees, it can become white noise. But when you hear the story of Jessica, who's a little nervous and starts quivering in her voice, people relate to that and are transparent to that. They love that stuff. And they're moved by it. And if you're consistent, that's the key, Richard. We did it one time, and then 5 months we did it, which a lot of people do. And then they come back to me, they're like, it didn't work. I'm like, well, 2 in the last 6 months isn't going to work. You're going to have to be relentless, and eventually the behavior will change. But here's the other part I love about it. Oh, by the way, the behavior's changing. You're also making your services that much more authentic. So you're winning in the service, but you're changing the culture at the same time.
Well, and when you bring in a story, it's something unique to that service, and it doesn't look like every other week.
Oh, exactly. It's unique. So I hope that helps, man. And I'm watching our time. I know I got to be careful because I have another appointment coming up, but tell me what else we want to jump into. Give me another question to jump into.
Well, let me, there's a couple that I don't want to. Is there anything, I'll tell you what, is there anything that you would touch on about working with churches lately that help recreate momentum? And obviously changing the culture is a huge thing. And I think that is a big thing. But is there anything else that you've noticed that churches have been doing to just to rebuild the momentum? Because I feel like I said, people have been through so much stuff. We at one time had, some of our connect group leaders and staff would come forward at the end of service and pray with people. And I really think that we need to do that. We need to engage in that. But is there anything that you're noticing that has been effective with people that you've been coaching and what you've been seeing of just some practical ways of rebuilding momentum?
Sure. Great question. I would give you a few thoughts on that. First thought is I would mentally and to a degree verbally draw a line in the sand and say, this is the size of our church. I think the more people, I think one of the most important jobs of a leader is to define reality. Here's the reality. We were 500, now we're 300. Today we're 300. Not pre-pandemic, not pre this, not pre that. We're 300. I was talking to a buddy of mine that's got, I don't know, pre-pandemic, 14,000 people in his church. He hasn't hit over 8 yet. Now 8,000 people sounds like a lot of people, but not when you were running 14. That's 6,000 people that are missing. But I told him the same thing. I'm like, dude, don't talk about it anymore. Don't talk about it with your staff. Just move on. This is who we are. Define reality. Move on. Don't talk about it anymore. Now get to work with what you got. You got X amount of people. What do we got to do to create culture? What do we got to do to get people engaged in ministry, which is something I've been promoting a big is engagement over attendance. Get your team focusing on recruiting and volunteering. Focus on systems of how we get people plugged into the service, to the church. Focus on leadership development. Focus on the things that do create excitement and momentum, and keep vision in front of them as well. It's not just coming back strong. It is what we are, or it is what it is. It's who we are. Our church was 300, now it's 150. Okay, well, that's where it's at. Now let's start growing that church. So right. I do think there's a mental shift that needs to happen. There's a verbal shift that needs to happen, and just call it what it is and move forward and quit kind of living in the past. I'm not saying you're doing that. I just would, if I was at a conference, I would say it to a crowd like, hey guys, hey lead pastors, draw a line, move forward, and then get back to the things that work and that have worked. Man, we engage people fast around here. We don't wait 8 months for them to get plugged in. We get people plugged in 6 to 8 weeks. Right. We created an invite culture, and this is how we do it. Man, we're developing leaders, and this is how we do it. You got to get back to the things that have worked. And yeah, it's a new world and a new this and a new that, but you still need leaders. You still need people to get plugged in. You still need an invite culture. You still need people and sharing their faith. That's all part of the Christian walk. How do we endorse those things? And that's what we got to get busy back to doing. Now, at a church that went from, I think you were saying you were running around 250, and now you're around 110, 120, whatever it is, right in there. So about half. I think you have to do all that, but you also have to make adjustments. Okay, what we were able to do maybe at this financial level or at this numerical level, maybe we can't do this or this, but what are the things? Now here's the thing, Richard, what are the things that are going to produce the greatest results? What are the things that are, here's the word, mission critical? Mm-hmm. Not important, not even, whatever, but what are the things like, okay, we can't do what we did over here. Mm-hmm. my buddy of 14,000 now down to 8,000. It's different. Like you're going to have to, it's like, okay, we're going to have to shave off a little bit of that, and they got to get mission critical. So think about like, hey staff, hey team, what are the 3 to 5 things we're going to do really, really, really well here? Yeah. We're going to, and they're growth engines, they're economic engines. We are going to go in deep with all of this.
I could not agree. I could not agree more. And I'll be honest, man, I haven't seen it. It was in that conversation with my wife, and then talking to some of our leaders. I think because of all the different variants and in our town, they were very concerned about it. Even though I'm in Texas, I'm in a college town, and people were wanting to be socially distant. So I kept 2 services going. Well, we're about to end the semester, and college kids are going to go home, and so our crowds go down in the summer for sure. Right. And my wife was like, we don't have critical mass. We don't our services feel empty with two, because we've stayed doing two services.
Mhm.
And it was one of, I have to laugh because I was the last one to know. I was just so much on, we're going to build back. We're going to build back. We're going to build back. And so I think the first Sunday of May, we're going to go back down to one service.
Mhm.
We did that on January the 2nd, because it was that first Sunday of the year back, and we have a Rudy's barbecue. It sounds so Texas. You know, I think you and I,
Yeah, I've been through this.
you've been with me.
Oh,
And
yeah.
man, we rented out that back room, and we had one service, and we said,
Wow.
we're all going to Rudy's afterward. And we packed out that room. We probably had 70 people there, and overflow into another room, and people were talking and connecting, and both services were coming together, and people were like, I didn't even know you attended here, you know? And so we're going to go back to that in May, with the hope that we'll go May, June, July, August, but then we'll be picking up momentum. And when we go to At the Movies in the fall, we can re-engage we're not going to say that. We're going to evaluate it as a leadership team and decide where we're going to go from there. But I think it'll give us that critical mass in the room that we don't have right now.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. No, I would encourage you, and I think that's part of drawing a line in the sand and defining reality. And
right.
Again, and I'm looking at the clock. I gotta jump off here in a minute, but to that thing, Richard, define the reality. This is who we are. Okay. Secondly, what are the 3 to 5 things that are mission critical that will create growth? And let me add one more quick thing is, when you define the things that are mission critical, put your best leaders in those areas of mission critical. I'm always amazed. I meet this amazing leader at a church of 300. He's an amazing leader. He's the vice president of some Fortune 500 company. And we have him doing the pancake breakfast once a month with 8 guys. Like, why do you take this star player who pitches a fastball at 103 miles an hour and put him at shortstop? Like, why is he over there?
Right.
Define the reality, declare what are the 3 or 4 mission criticals that you guys are going to be like, man, we're going to kill it in these 3 to 5 areas, and that's it. Then put your absolute highest level leaders in those pockets, not in other pockets, and get really streamlined so that you can start gaining momentum. And you know what? We'll add some stuff a little bit later, but we're not adding it now. And I think if you do that, you can, I think, start seeing some good momentum start coming back. So
awesome.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Well, man, dude, I'm out of time, brother. But dude, it's always great talking with you. You know I'm here to help in any way I can. So just let me know whatever I can do to serve you.
Sounds good. Thank you so much, Chris. This has been gold. I can't say how much I appreciate this coaching session and being on here. This is amazing.
Thanks for stopping by today. We hope you enjoyed it. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and to be on the lookout for more podcasts from Fly on the Wall. See you next time.